Hi, y'all, and welcome. This is Write Your Series on Sudowrite. So this session is dedicated to explaining Sudowrite's newest feature launch, which is the series folder functionality, which helps you complete either pick up or complete a series faster. So I'm Michael. I lead the community over here at Sudowrite. I'm joined today by my co-host, Nicole Broussard, one of our lead ambassadors in the community. I'm gonna jump straight into it since I gave y'all a little pre-roll before we started recording. So this is a look at today's session. It's a very optimistic timeline, so take that with a grain of salt. We're going to talk briefly about why Sudowrite did this sort of thing, why introduce a function feature sort of dedicated to series development. And then we're going to jump straight into the demo because that's what everybody is really here for. You want to see sort of how series folders work and how they can work for you. So that includes how they work, creating a series from scratch, using the series folder to write a single, sequel, a single sort of follow-up, and then what it looks like when you're bringing in a whole bunch of completed works to write the next one. I think there's a lot of folks that maybe have, I've got 5 or 6 novels. I spoke to folks out at Author Nation who were like, okay, I got my 14 novels in here. What next? So we're going to try and answer that question today. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. I mentioned this beforehand, but please do use the chat for questions. Please use the raise hand emoji if you have questions. And otherwise, we're going to get straight into it. So, why series? And the answer to this is just that Sudowrite was built to serve folks that write fiction. It is purpose-built tooling for fiction, and by far one of the most frequent requests that we've received, both in our Discord community and via support, is just, hey, I've spent a lot of time working on this book, and now I want to write the next one. And for a long time, there was no good way to do that. And our first step in that direction was the duplicate functionality. So folks used that as a sort of ad hoc series development tool where you could work on a project in Sudowrite, complete the story Bible, where you sort of tell Sudowrite, hey, this is everything I know for sure about my story. These are all my characters. This is all my world building elements, my settings, my lore. And then you would do all that work and it would sort of live in that project. So when we launched Duplicate, we saw folks were duplicating a lot of projects. And one of the most common reasons people were duplicating projects was because they were working on series. And so what this would look like is someone would duplicate a project and they would leave certain things in place, but then they would change everything else, right? You'd get rid of all the documents, you would change everything else. And so we thought, we sort of saw the desire even prior to that, but that was a clarifying point that, wow, folks are sort of using the tools that we have made available to work on series. So let's better support that. And so with that in mind, I'm going to hop straight into the demo so we can make the most of this time. I'm going to change which screen I'm sharing here. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that's a good question. I will get to that question, Nicole. Remind me to circle back to that question, maybe when we get to that part. So this is Sudowrite. If you are returning to Sudowrite after a little while away, this may look a little bit different. Something of note is that we've made significant changes to our homepage. And so what does this look like? Projects now display sort of in the shape of a book. You have your project's title, you get a word count and last edited date. Projects are also still sorted from the thing that you've worked on or been in most recently. That's what will show up sort of in the upper left. Now, something else you're going to notice is it used to be the case that you would only have projects. And recently, a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, we launched project folders. So this is a project folder, and you can pop inside and you can have as many projects as you would like inside of a folder. Under the new menu, you have the option to create a new folder. and you can go inside that new folder and create another new folder. And so you actually have a sort of functional directory now where you can organize your projects however you like. You'll see this sort of file path up top now that shows you exactly where you are. You can rename things and you can navigate back using that file path. So this was a nice little quality of life improvement. At the same time, we made some more significant aesthetic changes to the homepage, including getting rid of some of the noise to try and make it just like your desktop, peaceful. We've refreshed some of the menus, so you have resources under this question mark menu and things like that. And so with project folders available, and sort of while we were planning project folders, we realized this was the perfect opportunity to fully embrace series. And so series looks just like a folder, but the functionality is different. Inside of a standard project folder, your projects remain siloed. They remain independent projects, the same as though they were just here on your Sudowrite homepage. Inside of a series folder, things work different. So I'm going to start from scratch to show you this. I'm going to click New, and I'm going to create a series. And maybe I will move my tutorial project into this. I'm going to call this demo series. And I'm going to move my tutorial project into this demo series. And the way that I can do that, you can click and drag to organize now. I could drag this up to home to put it back on the home page if I wanted. But you also have the little three dots menu. So I can go to the three dots menu and select Move To, and it's going to list all of my folders and all of my series folders as well. So I just created demo series and I see it here. I'm just going to throw it in there. So I go back home and you'll see tutorial project now peeks out of demo series. This is not just an aesthetic touch. If you hover over these, you can get a little preview of the 3 most recently worked on projects inside of any folder. But you can also click straight into them from here. So rather than having to, if you're in Google Drive, you need to click into a folder, see what's in there, find the document you're looking for, click into it. Here you can see what you've worked on recently, and you can hop straight into that with a click. So here we are. I was using this tutorial project to demo some things, so I'm just going to get rid of some noise. But okay, so this looks just like any other project on Sudowrite. What you'll see, though, is in my story Bible on the left, if I scroll down, I have my brain dump, I have my genre, I have my style, I have my synopsis, and then there's a marker. It's this series, demo series. And so this is pulling in the title of the series folder that it sits within. So the other thing that this is doing is marking a sort of like line under which everything, so basically everything under this is shared between projects that exist within this series folder. So, here's all of my characters, here's my world building elements, my outline exists here, and this for everyone familiar with Sudowrite, this should be pretty unexceptional. This should look pretty familiar. What's new and what's cool is if I go back and I go to click New, say I'm in my demo series and I want to create the next project. I'm going to click Project. So I chose New in the upper left. I clicked Project, and it created this new project. And it created it inside of the folder. It will always create a project or create a folder or series inside of whatever directory you're working in. And now, if I go down to Story Bible, it's all blank. Brain dump's blank, genre is blank, synopsis is blank, but everything below that series mark is shared. So I already have this fresh project that I just created. It already has all of my characters in there. It has all of that character context, all of their traits. Everything is saved and shared, and this happens in real time. If I make a change to this and go navigate back to the other project, that change will be reflected in the other project as well. A way to think about it is that resources below the series name here are shared in real time. You see your characters, you see your world building, and here you can see I don't have an outline yet because I haven't filled in my brain dump for this. But if I go to project and I click down, you can see, oh, tutorial project. That's the other project that we've included in the demo series. So if I click on that, it's going to show me the outline. It's showing me the outline of that other project. This is helpful because as you're trying to get up and running, say you're starting your sequel and you're trying to think of the brain dump and you're like, well, where did I leave off? One thing you could do is go back and read the end of your other project or navigate back. But in a series folder, that's no longer necessary. In a series folder, you can just toggle to the outline of whatever project immediately precedes the one that you're working on, and you can get that full outline right here in the project. So that is creating a series from scratch. That is also sort of how you might go about creating the very first sequel. I think a lot of the value in the series tool that we see is bringing in existing work to sort of work on the next one. So that's where I want to spend the bulk of our time. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to create a new series, and I'm going to call this series something in the public domain, Sherlock Holmes. And I'm going to go into my series folder here. I'm going to import the first Sherlock Holmes. Does anyone know what the first Sherlock Holmes was? I believe it was A Study in Scarlet. Sudowrite's import function is now reading A Study in Scarlet. It's essentially parsing the full text of this novel in order to complete the story Bible. This takes a few minutes, so we don't have to watch this cook. But if you want to, you can see exactly what it's doing at a given time. It's going to build a full outline. It's going to identify and extract all of the characters and those world building elements, the important settings and things like that. While that cooks, I should have Martha Stewarted this so that was ready to go. I see a question in the chat, which is, what about character growth between books? I think this is the trick of series, right? Because some folks, authors will have different approaches to how they want to manage this. And so you're going to see a quirk of series in just a moment, which is multiple, essentially character versioning, which is, in the so I'll read this out since this won't be captured in the recording, but somebody asks, what about character growth between books? Say the main characters evolves from being fearful and shy at the beginning of book one to being courageous and standing up for himself by the end of book one. How could you reflect that in book two? So there's a couple of ways to go about. So we'll use the single sequel example to start. And in the single sequel example, so here we have tutorial project and we have this character that's named Cavendish, and he's, retired scammer called back in for one last job. A thief with a heart of gold, sort of tropey, but fun. What you can do is within this character card, you could have a personality that is called personality book one, or you may want to use the book's title. So for example, tutorial project. Maybe we call this during book one, but you have, man, it's going to make me write that all again, during book one. And then you could have a version of this trait. So you would add a trait, personality, and then you would say during book two. Short of having like an actual sort of like timestamp on characters, this is the way that you would manage that. And what you can do, this may be enough. I wouldn't trust the AI with this. And so there is a degree of active management that you could do where you could hide during book one. You say never, and you get this little I in the corner here. It says this is never shown to the AI. It is completely hidden. And so what we're doing is we're hiding during book one while we're working on book two. So these sort of hide show, this visibility functionality is, I believe it's persisted at the per project basis. And so like, let me just say, he's more easygoing. So it's going to fill this in, and then I'm just going to show you briefly what this looks like. Okay, during book two, Cavendish should become learn to let go of past regrets, etc. Okay, so in project one, say our sequel to the tutorial project, we would go in here, personality during book one, but it would still be visible to us, to the author, right? So we could always refer back to it, but the AI is not going to take that into consideration. Another thing you can do is you could just copy paste the substance of this into a new trait field and then make the changes that are necessary. And this is only necessary if for your purpose, if it's important to have essentially an archived version of that. And so this is something that we're going to see with series is that there's lots of different ways to slice and dice how to approach this. And it really is going to depend on how you work and what you like to have at your disposal. The other thing that we could do is if we've completed tutorial project, if this book is signed, sealed, delivered, and published, there's really no reason except for our reference that we would need personality during book one, unless, if we're creating some sort of sprawling multiverse where that version of Cavendish may appear in another installment. And so there are reasons to keep this, but theoretically, the character card should always reflect, it should be up to date with whatever you're working on, right? And so we'll call this tutorial sequel just for clarity.
I just wanted to add another thing to think about is like, say a character has PTSD really bad and they're still overcoming that. It'd be nice to have that little look back that you could toggle on when, okay, they're actually struggling right now.
Yeah. Yep, that's true. Let me just pull in another. So I'm going to get another Sherlock Holmes cooking here. Importing. That one's still working. This can take 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the substance and how many other people are importing books. Went a lot faster last night. There's your pro tip. Import in the middle of the night. All of that to say, if you're in tutorial project, whether you wrote it, whether you sort of started that here in Sudowrite and completed it here in Sudowrite, or whether you imported a sort of finished work to start from, when you're in the sequel, the most important thing is that the character that you're using, the one visible to the AI, is the one that reflects the scene that you're working on, the chapter that you're working on, what you're generating. So let's go back here and we're going to take a look. That's nice. You get a little notification at the bottom. I didn't get that last night. I guess it's because I sat and I watched the gear. But if you navigate away, you will get a little notification. So A Study in Scarlet, the first Sherlock Holmes book, has finished importing. Have folks used the import functionality? Have you experimented with that?
Document here or novel import?
Yeah, the novel import. Yeah, it's a good clarification. If you use import here, it's just going to pull in a document and throw it in the sidebar. But the novel import for context it'll pull that in. The entire manuscript will appear in a single document in the left. We do have plans to sort of add chapter. I'm not sure if it's going to be optional chapter splitting or just default chapter splitting in the future, where we do the chapter detection and break it up into multiple documents for you. That is on the roadmap somewhere. In the meantime, you get your full manuscript here and you get a completed Bible on the left. So we have a detailed synopsis of what happens in this book. We have, characters. I know him. I know him too. So Sherlock, John Watson, Enoch, Joseph, Jefferson, Lucy, John, Inspector Gregson. But okay, so it pulled in a bunch of characters. It pulled in London in the late 19th century, the American West in Salt Lake City, the Mormons, the Metropolitan Police Service. So all the hits. Now we're going to go back because what happened is in the course of that, while we were looking at A Study in Scarlet, the Sign of the Four completed importing as well. Now, the first thing I'm going to point out is we have something here called series timeline. This is to establish a sort of canonical sequence of the books in your series, of your projects in Sudowrite. And so how is this used? Essentially, this timeline informs the AI, the order of events. And so while these projects will always be refreshed based on whichever one you've most recently worked in. So if I go into the sign of the four right now and I click some buttons in here and I'm poking around and I go back, a study in Scarlet, I'm sorry, the sign of the four takes the first position. It takes the first position because it was the most recently worked in document. The sign of the four is the second book, but the second book is showing up first, and that's just a quirk of the recency. We've had a feature request for pinning, for example, or some sort of like, I want to establish the order both on my homepage and in folders. I want to say what order these projects show up in. That's something we're looking at. We probably will do something towards that end. But in the meantime, you have the series timeline. So you don't have to worry about the order that the actual projects show up, the sort of files show up. Instead, you're using the timeline to tell the AI, hey, this is the order things happen in. And what happens then is whatever book you're working in, the AI will have the context of what came before it. It does this sort of not at the full, when you click the right button to generate 50 words, you don't want it to have to read two full manuscripts necessarily. It'd make that quite expensive. And so instead, it sort of glances at the outlines for each story, just so it has the shape of what happened when. And that is a part of the saliency engine that Sudowrite uses to essentially make sense of when you have mountains of data. It's sort of parsing things to try and find what matters to what you're working on in the moment. So let's go into the more recent import, The Sign of the Four. So this is Arthur Conan Doyle's second Sherlock Holmes book. And we're going to go down to characters. And you're going to notice something here as I start to collapse these. We have some duplicates. And we have some duplicates because that question that came up about like, oh, what about, characters are sometimes a little bit different at the end of one book than they are at the end of the other. The way that Sudowrite's import works in conjunction with the series folder is that we don't want to make the decision for you about which version of that character is the authoritative, like Sherlock Holmes. And so if we look at these, they're going to be similar, but probably slightly different. Pay no attention to my custom. I have a Enneagram type in here that I've set as a default character trait. That's fun. You can do that. So let's see. Personality, brilliant analytical detective, extraordinary mind, driven by a relentless intellectual curiosity and a desire to solve complex puzzles, often eschewing emotion in favor of cold logical reasoning. Brilliant eccentric detective, known for powers of observation and deduction, highly intelligent, analytical, despite his aloof demeanor, is deeply committed to justice and the pursuit of truth. His physical description, like he didn't lose a leg or an eye in the course of the first book. And so what that means is that a lot of this is the same. It's up to you how you want to manage this. And you have an option. You could just delete one of the Sherlock Holmes. The way that Sudowrite's AI works is it's essentially looking for Sherlock or Sherlock Holmes in your character list. And if there are two cards here, it's going to choose on its own which one it's referring to. And so if you have duplicates like this that are similar but slightly different, and you have a strong opinion on which one is the correct one for the book that you're working in, you should either delete one of the duplicates, or what I've seen some folks do, and Nicole, I know you have some approaches to this, is do something like this. Now, I will say, this is something that we can and are planning to automate. And what this is going to, for the sake of folks that are importing work, we want to do this labeling for you, right? Where we're just saying like, hey, we know which book this came from. And so we still need to, we have this planned and this is on the roadmap, essentially auto labeling these. We just got to figure out where we do that because I don't think we're going to just slap it into the name field. Yes, Nicole.
I want to add too for the people that want to label their cards that way, because you might want to keep a character card for editing a certain way and then move on to a different character card with them. I've been told it's very important not to have these spaces. So Sherlock Holmes would actually end up being one word. Book one, it would all be one word, Sherlock Holmes, book one, Sherlock Holmes, book two.
If you want it to ignore that.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I see. You're saying if you're not going to delete one and if you're not going to hide one,
Correct.
then in order to obscure it from the AI, and this is probably true of other names as well, right? Like, so there are essentially three ways to hide stuff from the AI. The first is hide it from the AI using the visibility settings under the three dots. You can choose never. Um, the second is to just delete it and make sure the AI can't see it because it's deleted. It's in the trash can. You can restore from the trash. So you could delete it and always bring it back. And the third is to name it something, B1 Sherlock Holmes or, whatever you want to do. Sherlock Book 1. If you do something like this, the AI is not going to see Sherlock in your prose or in your beats and try and generate using this character card because it doesn't say Sherlock here. It says Sherlock Book 1. It doesn't say Sherlock here. It says the consulting detective. So if you steer clear of these, but what this allows you to do is without hiding it, without toggling this to never, you can still always refer back to, say you have a flashback that uses this character card. You could then include Sherlock Book 1 in your beats, and the AI is going to see Sherlock Book 1 and look for this specific character card. So this is a little bit next level. It is sort of a pro tip. But yeah, it's totally a viable option. Again, there's definitely some planned improvements to this. The idea of like giving some signal to the authors that are using the import functionality, sort of which book, which installment a given character or setting was sort of sourced from. That's just helpful context to have that visible. So we are working on that. In this case, the important thing is like there are characters. You can see it's not there are duplicates, but it's not chock full of duplicates. And part of that is because, Sherlock and Watson are the two that are in every story. And a lot of the supporting cast sort of rotate through. Now, what's cool is when you go back and you create a new project and you want to create Sherlock Holmes, yeah, Sherlock Holmes 3, Sherlock in space. You go down to your characters and you've already got these characters, meaning you could go back to your back catalog of characters and say, oh, Lucy was originally in that study in Scarlet. So let's bring Lucy back in Sherlock in Space. And again, it's sort of at the point of chapter generation or at the point where you're actually working on a story, you can clean things up if you'd like. And you can just say like, oh, I'm not going to be using these characters. So I'm going to go through and flag these as, hidden to the AI because they're not really relevant to this story. Thanks to the saliency engine, a lot of this stuff isn't actually necessary. So for example, Athelney here, Sudowrite's AI is not going to look at this character card, certainly never when it's hidden. But if this was left visible, it's only going to look at this character card if you use their name, or one of their names. I guess it is something to be aware of if you have maybe common surnames or, if you have Inspector and you're like, why is it using this other character? It may be because it sees Inspector and thinks you're referring to Inspector Gregson. So a best practice may be to hide these. It's not entirely necessary because Salience Engine does a pretty good job. Okay.
Okay.
So, yes.
We had a question in chat that I thought was worth bringing up for the recording. Should you hide series characters that don't appear in a particular book while working on it? So it's kind of what you covered a little bit too.
Yeah, I was sort of answering that maybe midstream because I do think that it's a matter of preference and practice. Enoch Drebber has a name where, if Enoch's not in my book and I don't plan on having another Enoch, then it's not necessary to hide it because Saliency Engine's never going to look at Enoch. If you have a lot of Johns, if you have a lot of Joes, if you have a lot of, Jennifers, why were those all J names? If you have a lot of those, you may want to hide common names because Sudowrite's AI via Saliency Engine is doing name matching, right? And so it's looking for Jonathan Small, but it's also looking for the name small, and it's also looking for Jonathan. And it has more, it's not just doing name matching, it goes through a bunch of other stuff. But that could definitely, if it sees like a pronoun match and a name match, it might try and inject a character. So a total best practice, if you wanted complete control, the thing that you would do is you would probably go through and just hide everything that's irrelevant to the installment, but it's not necessary. Now, I will say one other product improvement that was flagged to our attention that has been prioritized for work is a way to do this rapidly, a way to do it in bulk. Because now that folks, I think what convinced us was seeing somebody import 17 books into a series folder. And, they definitely had plenty of characters that were unique to installments, but for someone that appeared in 9 of those books, that's a lot of character cards. And so they have the option of deleting 8 of them and sort of having the canonical version of that character, which is maybe has a trait field that indicates their history, but otherwise everything in it is current. And when I say current, I mean up to date for whatever installment that you're working on. You could do a sort of like synthesis of the other versions of that character into a single trait field just for historical purposes. But they have the option of either hiding 8 out of 9 of those characters or deleting 8 out of 9 of those characters or leaving them all visible and taking a Jesus takes the wheel approach and letting Sudowrite's AI do its best to parse it. Yes, so this is being recorded, and we do have 2 more of these this week. We have one tomorrow, and we have one on Friday. We're sort of at the 15-minute remaining mark. I want to make sure that we cover anything that folks... Are there any sort of like big glaring questions that folks have so far? Show us the import novel steps again. Sure. Here I am. I think I have another... I'm going to get rid of Sherlock in space. Now, actually, this is something I should illustrate. So I am deleting Sherlock Holmes 3, Sherlock in Space, and before I do, I'm going to add a character. I'm going to add a character named... Oh, no, I want to generate a character instead of add it because it's faster. So I'm going to generate a character named Space Alien named Gengar. Go. The other 2 series sessions that we'll be offering tomorrow and Friday will cover a lot of the same material, but they're going to be sort of suited more towards the individual host's workflow. Okay, so we created Zengar Zephyr. He's a space alien that only appears in Sherlock Holmes 3. And then I realized, wow, Sherlock Holmes 3, Sherlock in Space was a terrible idea, and I delete it. Instead, I'm going to get started on an import of the actual Sherlock Holmes 3, The Hound of the Baskervilles. The Hound of the Baskervilles, little kind of creeping horror. That was a better direction rather than Sherlock in Space. Now, while that's cooking, I'm going to go back to Sign of the Four and just refresh myself on where we left off in the second installment. Now, if I head down to characters, what you're going to see is Gengar. Gengar Zephyr from Sherlock in Space. Deleting a project that is in a series will not delete the characters that originated in that project. And so what this gets at is the idea that anything below this line, anything below the series and the series name here from the series folder, anything in the characters, world building, or outlines, like those are considered shared resources, and they're sort of like they're created and entered into the series, and they remain in the series even if you delete a project there. Okay, outline is the exception. I guess we didn't have an outline for Sherlock in Space, but I do not think that is the case for outline. I think outline will go with the project, but characters and world building elements from that story, those go into a sort of characters and world building pool. Okay, so Hound of the Baskervilles, we're working on bringing that in. I think I did that pretty fast, but the flow, just to reiterate the import novel steps, you click import in the upper left, and then here you can see you can import a TXT, a .doc, a .docx, an RTF, or an ODT file. Those are the compatible file types. You click to browse, and then you just select it from your file navigator. And then it goes through this process where Sudowrite chews on it for a while, reads the work, and then generates all of those characters. Okay, do we have any guesses on how long the Hound of the Baskervilles is? Arthur Conan Doyle really loved that 43,000 word mark. I'm going to say 46. Let's see. 59. Wow. I guess by Price is Right rules, I win. But okay, so we've brought in the Hound of the Baskervilles. And if I go down here now, we're going to notice yet another Sherlock Holmes. It's like the Spider-Verse, but Sherlock Holmes. Yet another John Watson as well. We have Sir Henry Baskerville was added, James Mortimer. Now you'll notice I had a lot of these cards collapsed, but what happened is as I imported, the collapsed ones stayed collapsed, so those are sort of saved at the character card level, but the fresh imports were all expanded. And so this is a little bit of a signal as to like, hey, what came in with this most recent import? And so you could use that in your own sort of like manual versioning if you wanted to. I mean, something that you could do is you could just add a trait and you could say featured in, and then you could say book 3, Hound of the Baskervilles. So like that's another approach. The thing that we're considering is like, oh, how to make it fast and effortless to sort of like zero in on the characters that you want to. Let's see. Okay, so a bunch of characters. We got a bunch new world building elements, the Andaman Islands, Baskerville Hall, Baskerville family, British police force. And as before, if we were to create, say we wanted to write the 4th book, well, that's sort of where my canonical knowledge of Sherlock Holmes starts. I don't actually remember what the 4th book was. You'll see we have a fresh blank project, but it was created in this series folder, which means if we go down here, we have all of those characters right away. Now, the sort of like the biggest question of all is like, okay, so I understand I've imported 15 books. I've imported my entire existing series. I have it in this folder. I've gone through and I've made light edits or I've deleted duplicates or I have otherwise like added notation for my own reference in terms of where these characters are from. I think I know who I want in my next book, but what do I do now exactly? So that's the biggest question. It's like, okay, I'm ready. I've got everything prepped. How do I just write the next book? And the answer is, well, how you always would on Sudowrite, and that is going into the brain dump, and it's starting with the brain. It's starting with this idea of like, okay, you would say like, okay, this is the 4th book in the Sherlock Holmes series. In this one, he is investigating a billionaire's disappearance after his sub goes missing. You would give it something like that. You would say classic mystery. You would give it a style. Now, we have had already, so this feature is brand new, but we've already had feature requests saying like, hey, in theory, my series would have a very similar style or my series would be in the same genre. So we've already had that feature request and it's something else that we're prioritizing is at least giving you the option of using style from other books in the series, giving you the option of quickly just selecting the genre from other books in the series. And that will most likely work similar to how Outline does today. So if I go down to Outline, we don't have an outline for this book 4. Sherlock book 4, we will call it. So we don't have an outline for Sherlock book 4, but we do have it for all of these others. And so probably, and I'm speaking out of turn, I'm not the designer or the engineer working on this, but probably genre and synopsis will work similarly once we make that change. In the meantime, you're going to work on the next installment in your series the same way that you would work on a fresh project in Sudowrite. Complete a brain dump, complete a genre, select or bring your own style. In this case, just to keep it moving, I'm going to select refined and literary from my style selector. I'm going to generate a synopsis. Okay. Terrence T. Tarleton. Ah, that's a good name. After his private submarine vanishes during an expedition. Reclusive tycoon had long fascinated the public with his ambitious ventures, but his sudden absence sparks a frenzy of speculation and concern. Okay, great synopsis. Love it. Ooh, Atlantis. So essentially now we've sort of leapfrogged some of the more tedious steps. So we added our concept for what the sequel should include, and there are plugins that will help you with this as well. If you're looking for that brain dump, that sort of like initial idea for what the next book in your series should be, I think it's one of our featured plugins, a sequel generator right in the plugins directory, if you need help with that. But otherwise, bring your own brain dump, throw that genre and style in there, generate your synopsis, and you're in business. You've already got all your characters. Um, you could go through and say like, "Ooh, I know exactly who I want to feature into this," and hide the irrelevant characters. Or, like I said, you can leave them visible and see, put Sudowrite to the test and see how well the saliency engine is able to stay on the rails. The final step to get your next book going would really just be generating an outline. So I'm going to try that without going through and doing that active management just for the sake of time. I want to see how this does. So I'm going to generate novel outline. That's going to take a minute. It takes a little bit longer now that we've made outlines essentially unlimited. You can have them be as long as you would like. So we're generating that outline. And this process would look the same as it does today, where you generate this outline. Based on that outline, you would make edits to the outline as desired, and then you would create a linked document for each chapter. And then head in and either bring your own beats for that chapter or generate beats and generate prose. Any questions that I missed, Nicole? Did you catch anything?
I'm not seeing anything unanswered.
Cool.
Will importing earlier novels use up our word count?
Oh, that's a great question. So the import function is included with Sudowrite. So you can import as many books as you want. It's not going to use any of your credits doing. So it's a great way to get a leg up on the next installment in your series. You can always check what something costs by using the little gear in the upper right and navigating to show recent activity. It's going to give you a list. So you can see import novel, 0. Import novel, 0. So this is Rex. This is cloud-based storage. So Sudowrite is a web app, meaning everything that you work on here, this is all saved to the cloud. So it's saved to your Sudowrite account in particular. So if you're working on a different computer somewhere else, as long as you have access to your email and you can actually get into Sudowrite, then you're fine. Everything is saved there. Oh, that's a good question. Do illustrations within your manuscript mess up the import process? That I'm not sure, actually. I have not tested that. As long as it's one of the compatible formats, it should work fine. I have seen some weird things here and there with images that are embedded with alt text where that alt text is considered, but I don't know. That would have to probably be an experiment. Um, okay. So yeah, the sort of last thing you would do here is create a chapter. So chapter 1, curious case. Let's go into a curious case. Let's generate beats. And this is that pretty standard flow. So what's exceptional about it is how fast it was because we didn't have to do any character setup. We didn't have to do any world building. I think there is the question of, did anything happen to your character between Hound of the Baskervilles and book 4? Because you may want to update the character card, even if you're just working on a single sequel. It's your first sequel to a book you've already got. That character card that is generated based off of that first book might not be the one you want to roll with to generate that second book. You might want to make some tweaks to it. You might want to say in the years since, etc. And so it's still a best practice, definitely, to review your characters and make sure that the ones that you're going to be generating with, and this is true of settings and world building elements as well, but I'm very focused on characters for the sake of this demo. We would generate prose and we'd be writing the Sherlock Holmes book 4. I think it already exists though, unfortunately. Cool. So we are pretty much at time. I want to be mindful of that. If there are any other questions, this is your last chance to get them in. I would say the other thing I just wanted to point out is we do have some great resources available on this. So first of all, the best resource of all would be our Discord community. We've got over 10,000 friendly forward-thinking authors that are in there that are using Sudowrite, and super users are definitely there, and they have a lot of experience with series already, and so you can drop a question in the help channel and get some help right away. The staff is all in there too. The other thing that I would point you to, oh yeah, as Nicole points out, you're here in a live class or you're watching this on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel, we're going to be posting more class recordings to that in the very near future, so stay tuned to YouTube. Also, join our live classes. If you click on this, it's going to actually bring you to our live class calendar. We've got more classes coming up this week. We have them pretty much every day of the week, barring some holidays. And the final thing I would point you to is we have excellent documentation. So if you go to docs.sudowrite.com, or if you find it in this drop down, I think it's called user guide here, but this will bring you to our docs. And in our docs, you can always find, so let's see, there's a section here on importing files. There's a section on series support under features. So we have a very detailed explainer on how series support works. And my favorite thing about all of this is you can ask pretty much whatever. There's an AI agent in here. And so you can ask like, can I import directly into a series? Or you can ask pretty much whatever, and it will read all of our documentation in a blink and tell you how to do what it is you're trying to do. If you prefer a robot to humans, that is a great path. If you like humans, come hang out with us in the Discord. So I think that is going to do it for us today. Thanks so much for joining me. Please join us soon in the Discord or in another live class, and I look forward to it. Thanks, y'all.